Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube video. My name is Eric Hildeman, and today I'm going to be debunking the claim that left-leaning science fiction writers don't make much money with their writings. Go woke, go broke is the shorthand version of this particular argument, and it's been made by a number of people out there, but I want to specifically focus on the leading proponent of this claim, Mr. John Delarose. Now, John Delarose, of course, is the man who got himself thrown out of Worldcon 76 at San Jose, California in 2018 for announcing his intention to violate the convention's code of conduct. By the way, he looks nothing like this in his comic book rendering of him. Here's a recent picture I found. Not a bad-looking guy, but nowhere near as sinister-looking as the artistic rendering might have you believe. But before and after Worldcon 76 in San Jose, he made a number of spurious claims regarding various people on the internet, but this time I'm going to focus specifically on this one particular item concerning go woke, go broke. If you want to see the video, here's the URL. There's probably a way to embed the link into the video itself, but for the purposes of what I want to do for this video, I'm not going to take the time to learn how to do that here. I don't do YouTube videos very often, so this is kind of a one-shot deal for me, or at least the first time through. In this video, he claims that more left-leaning science fiction books are doing poorly in sales, and he uses the catchphrase, go woke, go broke. He points to two specific examples. Zoe Quinn, who wrote her book Crash Override about her experiences being doxxed and harassed by online trolls, and one of his all-time favorite punching bags, Patrick S. Tomlinson. He posts some book sale numbers to make his point. Now, the main problem with book sales numbers is that they're notoriously difficult to get. Even if one does get certain exact figures, they can be tricky because they are either brick-and-mortar book sales numbers and all kinds of other factors throw them off. For example, there are ebooks and audiobooks, and sometimes there are sales of hardcovers that are available, but not paperbacks or trade paperbacks. Sometimes it's the other way around. There are plenty of third-party sales. There are sales at conventions. There are direct-from-publisher sales. There are online platform sales. Only the publishing houses really know for certain how many copies have actually been sold, and they're never very forthcoming. There are subscription services out there that track book sales, but they can be expensive, and they're not very accurate. For example, there's NPS Bookscan, formerly Nielsen Bookscan. That's one of them, and it gives sales figures, but only in a limited capacity, brick-and-mortar sales only. They say that it supposedly includes Amazon sales, but we'll see in a minute why that's a dubious claim at best. Bookstat is a more accurate service, but it's also brick-and-mortar bookstore sales-based and also caters only to high-volume publishers who can afford their services. Their subscription package starts at a whopping $60,000 per year. I learned this when I kept pestering them about getting a subscription, and finally somebody responded and said, you can't afford it. And, well, he was right. Needless to say, most people also can't afford to spend the equivalent of a mid-range sports car just to check the sales figures of a book. And those two options are basically it. So where does John Delarose get his book numbers? Well, I have an insider in the publishing industry, he says in his video. Well, maybe. His source is a guy on Kiwi Farms, which is a right-wing organization dedicated to stalking and humiliating SJWs, which means social justice warriors, which in this case kind of means everyone to the left of Ron DeSantis. Not exactly the most trustworthy of sources, and the Kiwi Farms blog poster with this information is this guy, a guy named Boston Brandt. I have no idea if that's his real name. His profile doesn't give out his actual employer, but in one of his posts, he says, without giving too much away, I work as a member of the editorial staff at one of the Big Five's spec fiction imprints. I'm going to take a guess here and say that he works at Bain, which is an arm of Simon & Schuster, and where a lot of right-wingers have been known to hang and publish their stuff. Though I might be wrong. He might work somewhere else. I'm not 100% certain of it. John says, I've independently confirmed what he posted. Oh, he did? Well, how? He fails to tell us. Here's a screen cap from John's source on his YouTube video posted back on December 28th, 2021. And it shows a screen cap from the Kiwi Farms website. It shows the book sales for Patrick S. Tomlinson, and as you can see, Pat's bestseller only shows 2,631 books sold. But something is missing. If you're smart, you'll see it right away. That's right, there's no date range. Yeah, without the date range, these numbers are meaningless because it's impossible to tell if Patrick's sales numbers are for the month, for the quarter, for the year, or maybe something else. Now, that's just plain sloppy. But it's telling that not one person on Kiwi Farms ever questioned this, in spite of the glaring error. John Delarose didn't question it. Nobody questioned it. So we're going to have to confirm first whether or not these numbers are really the all-time BookScan sales for this particular book before we can even continue. But before we do, let's take a look at what Kiwi Farms shows for Zoe Quinn's numbers. Again, the numbers look low. Let's see. The Zoe's numbers only show, there it is, 3,441 books sold. But over what time span? Once again, we're going to have to confirm this first to see if these numbers are even the actual all-time book sales according to BookScan before we even get started. But how do you do that? Well, obviously I didn't, pony up $60,000 to double-check these figures on BookStat, so that was out. But BookScan, there are more affordable subscription services. To check the sales of a given book's ISBN through BookScan directly, one can pay an annual fee to BookScan of $80 or $85. But there is another way. Publishers Marketplace sells subscriptions for as little as $25 per month. Once subscribed, you can upgrade your membership to include a BookStat tracking option for an additional $25 per month, which allows you to track up to 5 ISBNs. That's what I did. And here's what I found. I started by running the ISBN for Patrick Tomlinson's novel, The Ark. Here are the results. Publishers Marketplace shows the BookScan numbers for Patrick Tomlinson's novel, The Ark, to be 0 sales this week. Let's see if I can highlight this here. There's my cursor. 0 sales this week. 4 to date, and 2,639 sales in total from release date. You can see where it says release to date right here. And that matches very closely with Boston Brand's figure of 2,631. Since Boston ran his numbers towards the end of December of 2021, and I ran my numbers on every stoner's favorite date of 4/20/2022, that means 8 additional sales happened over those last few months. So those numbers are confirmed as being from BookScan, and Boston Brand did in fact give out the total BookScan sales for Patrick Tomlinson's The Ark. Now let's look at Zoe Quinn's book. Here, BookScan shows Zoe's total book sales for Crash Override to be 3,444. Now, that again matches closely with the 3,441 books sold that Boston Brand showed and confirms this as a release-to-date figure. Although there's also 3,405 electronic sales, which show as well, which kind of doubles the overall total to 6,849. Boston Brand failed to include that, which is kind of shitty of him. But even though Boston failed to include a date range and Zoe Quinn's overall totals, the search here does include both the date and range and confirms that these are the real BookStat figures. It also proves that I am dialed in with this Publishers Marketplace account. I'm seeing the exact same figures that Boston Brand did. So does that settle it? Are these figures accurate and these books really are failures? Are they utterly, devoid of being able to draw any profit? And the answer, of course, is no. So, see, here's the thing. BookScan numbers are notoriously inaccurate, and to prove it, we'll run the same check as before, but this time, we're going to use John Delarose's books. After all, he felt it was fair to use BookScan numbers on Tomlinson and Quinn. Let's see how the same measuring stick applies when used on the books by John Delarose. Delarose's first #1 bestseller was his steampunk novel For Steam and Country. He saw one day that it was sitting at #2 in the steampunk category, and he put out a blog post asking his fans to buy lots more copies and push it up to #1, and apparently that campaign worked. So this is, or rather was at one point, a #1 Amazon bestseller for steampunk fiction. And to be fair, steampunk is a very specific subgenre category. But we'll let that slide. Let's see what happens when we plug the ISBN for that book into Bookstat. Here's the ISBN here, 978-951-1837037. Okay, which I pulled earlier. I had a slide here that actually showed that being pulled from Amazon. I forgot to put that in, sorry. But this is the number. You can go online and you can confirm that. And, it's not currently in our BookScan database. That's interesting. It says to try again on or after April the 21st, but this book has been out since 2019. If they don't have any sales data by now, they never will. So this is one of Delarose's biggest sellers. And in fact, it may be the best seller of his, but BookScan doesn't even show one single copy sold. But to be fair, let's try another one. Colony Launch is a pretty good book to choose from because JDA bragged that it should have won the Hugo Award last year. That's a big boast. And is this book really all that? Let's take a look. First we'll get the ISBN. This is what I should have done before, but I can do it this time. Okay, and we got this, 978, let's see, 195-183-7167, all right. And then we plug it into Publishers Marketplace and get our results. And here's let's see, 978-195-1837. Yep, that's it. Okay. And we find, holy shit, 50? 50? I mean, so much for go woke, go broke. Now, if I had the ethical standards of John Delarose, I would spread this figure around and say to people, see, JDA is not making any money. He's only sold 50 copies. His book sucks. And John would counter that 50 is nowhere near his actual book sales, and he would be right. But you see, this is how unreliable BookScan is for giving the whole picture. Do you see where I'm going with this? Just for fun, let's do one more. Clockwork Dancer is a good one to pick because we have proof of its #1 status for steampunk right here. Okay? Bestsellers in steampunk and graphic novels. There it is. The picture is taken from one of John Delarose's video blogs in which he brags, quite rightly, that Clockwork Dancer is being a #1 seller on Amazon. And here it is at #1 in the steampunk category. Here's John himself also over here on the left. He kind of looks like he needs a shave, but that's no big deal. Now, we can find Clockwork Dancer on Amazon. There it is. And we scroll down to find the ISBN number, which is right here. Okay. And then we plug that number into Publishers Marketplace, and we find, oh, fuck no, 37? Wow. Now, why would a graphic novel that we have absolute proof is a #1 Amazon bestseller, why is it only showing at 37? Well, the answer should be obvious, because BookScan doesn't show everything. Not even close. John would probably be the very first person to complain that the figures I just showed aren't accurate, but that's exactly my point. If these aren't the actual book sales for John Delarose, then they aren't the actual book sales for Patrick Tomlinson, or Zoe Quinn, or anybody else for that matter. Because we confirmed that we're using the same source, BookScan. Now, BookScan only shows sales from brick-and-mortar book vendors, such as Barnes & Noble, Powell, Target, or Walmart, but only participating Walmart stores even bother to record anything, and supposedly, BookScan records Amazon sales, but obviously they don't record everything, do they? Electronic sales, especially electronic sales made directly from the publisher, are not recorded. Plus, here's the thing about Amazon. It's both a vendor and a platform for other vendors. Just because you bought something on Amazon, it doesn't mean Amazon is the actual seller. Often the item you bought on Amazon was actually sold by someone else. And if you buy a book on Amazon when the seller was someone else, that sale will not register on BookScan. In fact, the only Amazon sales which show up on BookScan at all are the ones from its brick-and-mortar stores. And news just broke recently that all these stores are closing. The number of Amazon sales that show up on BookScan is about to go from very few down to 0. John Delarose is independently published, which means most of his sales will not show up. Hence, JDA's biggest steampunk hit doesn't even make BookScan's radar at all. So remember, BookScan numbers vastly underreport actual book sales. They're unreliable. But you might be saying, hey, wait. Okay, we get it. BookScan doesn't tell the whole story. But what does tell the whole story? What are the real sales figures? Well, fortunately, there are ways to estimate that. And they don't prove any exact sales figures. But they at least can give you a ballpark estimate. But first, we should have some sense of what constitutes a successful book. I mean, once we know what the sales numbers are, how do we know it's really a hit unless we have a benchmark? And JDA has reason to brag because he has hit number 1 on Amazon in at least one specific subcategory, but is that all that's required? What's par value here? To answer that, I'm going to refer you to an article by Ellie Griffin, published on May 9th, 2021. I think I got the link through NPR, but I'm not sure. I don't quite remember. I just saved it. Here's the URL for the webpage. Now, the main point of the article is that writing books is a lousy way to make money because the vast majority of books don't sell more than 1,000 copies, ever. But along the way, the article also gives us some hard book sales figures, and that gives us a reasonable benchmark. First, we have to look at book sales figures from 2020, and these are some BookStat figures, not BookScan, so they're a little bit more accurate, but still not comprehensive. And as you can see, the vast majority of books, 2.6 million physical copies, and a little over 5.5 million books overall, including digital and audio copies, sold less than 1,000. So it's clear that's pretty much rock bottom. Only a few hundred sold more than 100,000 copies. And that amounts to 0.01% of book sales overall. So above 100,000 sold is the uppermost tier. And only 9 titles went above that in 2000. And only 9 titles went above 500,000. And only 1 title sold more than 1 million. And even that was a digital copy. So that's the absolute zenith right there. So based on this, it seems like a book that breaks free of the pack doesn't really happen unless it sells more than 10,000. Remember, these are single-year book sales for 2020. A lot of books sell between 1,000 and 10,000 in a single year, but go on over several years to continue selling and net the author between 25,000 and 60,000 over the course of several years. So long as the author keeps writing books that continually sell, that's pretty good. For a single year total of 10,000 copies, that's where the books kind of separate themselves from the pack. That's where an author can claim to have more top-tier status. And bear in mind, a lot of authors, especially in nonfiction, really make their money not in book sales, but in using their book to get onto the lecture circuit. And if that author makes several hundred to a couple $1,000s per lecture, he really doesn't need to sell all that many books. He can sell no more than a few thousand books overall in order to make a pretty good living on the book that he wrote. The book sales are just gravy. So let's see another chart. Now this one shows the profitability margins on book sales, and for traditional publications it's based on a 15% profit margin on a $15 book, and 70% revenue of a $6 book for self-published. And again, you can see that selling only 1,000 copies really doesn't net an author very much. Selling between 1,000 and 10,000, now that's a little bit better. But once that threshold is crossed over 10,000, and you're getting into the range of 12, 13, and 15,000 copies being sold, that's where the author starts thinking about quitting his day job and writing novels full-time. And again, these are single-year totals based on 2020 numbers. So if an author keeps publishing a mid-range book every year or 18 months, and each of those books sells between 1,000 and 10,000 copies a year, all those book totals add up, and the author is making the equivalent income of a decent white-collar job. So now we have our benchmarks. 10,000 books sold is good, 20,000 books sold is great, and 50,000 books sold, that's James Patterson, Stephen King, and J.K. Rowling territory. And that's over the lifetime of the book. If any of these sales goals is reached in a single year, that's pretty damn good overall. Great, but how do we get our actual sales estimates? Well, if one cannot get a solid figure from a publishing house, a ballpark figure can be reached by using a technique I call the 100,000 rule. Now, you take 100,000, divide that by whatever number your Amazon ranking is, and that gives you the monthly sales totals. Now, there are a few problems with this. First, that's only monthly sales, which means you aren't getting the total from the book's release date. You could get the total from release date using this method, but you would have to run this check each and every month the book is out. Furthermore, the sales rank fluctuates dramatically, not only month to month, but week to week or even day to day. So this number is unsteady and therefore unreliable. Furthermore, it fails at the extremely high and extremely low numbers. The other method is a lot quicker, but also not 100% accurate. I call it the review multiple method, and it works like this. An average of about 1 in 100 customers who buy a book will write up a review on Amazon. That figure is massively disputed, and some people say that it's as little as 0.5%. Others say it's 2.5%. People have said the reviews are as high as 15%, but that's for non-book products. You know, the Amazon sending people emails trying to remind people to review these things. You know, how did you like this product? Rate and review. But you have to remember also, a lot of book sales don't come through Amazon. They're either offline or Barnes & Noble or something else. So 1 in 100 is about right. It's what I'm going with. And you'll see in a moment that this does give us pretty reasonable results. You can use this average to come up with an estimate for book sales. You take the number of reviews, multiply that by 100, and that should give you a very rough estimate of the total number of book sales. As an example, let's start with Patrick Tomlinson's book, The Ark, again, and see what we get. Here's the Amazon.com listing. Down here are the reviews. Okay, and as you can see, The Ark has 384 reviews on its global rating. Okay, so if we take those 384 reviews and multiply that by 100, we get 38,400 books sold. Tomlinson's book has been out since December of 2015, and we're doing this calculation in May of 2022, so his book has been out for 6.5 years. So we have to divide our total by 6.5. So that's an average of 5,908 books sold per year. Not bad. It's not huge, though. Almost 6,000. But book sales typically start out strong with a heavy marketing and then taper off as the years go by. And it's been several years since this book came out. So they follow this sort of pattern. Please forgive the crude drawing. I kind of whipped this out fast. With the sales starting high, right around here, and then they kind of taper off years later. All book sales kind of follow this same pattern, unless the book wins an award, in which case you see a second hump after the book gets nominated and possibly even wins. And if the book gets turned into a movie, in that case you might even see a third hump in the lopsided camel. So looking at this and realizing Patrick Tomlinson had an average of a little less than 6,000 books per year overall, you know, we might draw the line right around here, that means that at one point in years past, he probably sold closer to, 8,000 books per year. He might have even gotten close to that 10,000 book, rank mark that we said is sort of the mark of a real successful book. So maybe these days, down here, year 6 and 7, he's selling between 1 and 2,000 copies of a book, of that particular book per year. Might be. So let's try one by John Della Rose and see what we get. Here's JDA's Amazon listing for Steam and Country. And down here are his reviews. He has 280 global ratings at the time I screen capped this. For Steam and Country came out 2.5 years ago, so I'm plugging that into the formula, and we find this book has sold an average of 11,200 per year. That's outstanding. And again, that follows the pattern we saw earlier here with the curve. This is a relatively new book, released 2.5 years ago, and the book sales still reflect this high peak. You know, we're in year 2, right about there. And that doesn't change the fact that this is a pretty good accomplishment that John Della Rose has had. He broke the 10,000 mark, enough to garner him #1 sales status in a genre-specific category, like steampunk graphic novel. Keep in mind, though, Patrick Tomlinson's estimate put him not too terribly far behind. He was maybe a little behind him there. He was at 8,000 or maybe 10,000 as well. JDA should be proud, but he shouldn't be punching down. Tomlinson's book really didn't do all that much worse in the final analysis. So now, let's do Zoe Quinn. Here's her Amazon listing, and here's her reviews section. And we see here that she has 281 reviews. One more than John Della Rose has, but this book has been out for a lot longer. It was published in early September of 2017. So since we're doing this calculation in May of 2022, we need to divide this by 4 years and 9 months. Here's the calculation. And we see that Zoe Quinn's book has a total of 28,100 and an average of 59,016 books sold per year. But again, the curve applies. And for nonfiction, this curve is a lot steeper. So the book likely hit 8,000 or even 10,000 books sold per year, but certainly we're guaranteed that Zoe Quinn definitely hit between 7,000 and 8,000 per year when the book initially came out. So let's review. In terms of total sales, The Ark leads the way with 36,100, and Crash Override comes in second with 28,100. For Steam and Country comes in a close third with 28,000, but For Steam and Country really doesn't have anything to be ashamed of because it's only been out a couple of years. And the other two books have been out for several years. In fact, we look at the annual sales estimates. We find that For Steam and Country comes in first place with 11,200, and The Ark comes in last place with an annual average of 5,908. But remember, these are only estimates, and they're very rough estimates at that. They're based on the average number of times people leave a review, and that is by no means a constant. It varies with book to book, and we need to remember that that can really throw off our numbers a great deal. But it does apparently show that the misquoted BookScan numbers are way off. 26,031 does not equal 38,400. 3,441 does not equal 28,100. And even if those figures, 38,400 or 28,100, are off, or even wildly off, it shows that there were a lot more books sold than this pithy little teeny tiny amount that gets quoted in BookScan. So remember, for Steam and Country, 11,200, that was a pretty safe estimate. That's exactly the sort of figure that we would expect to see, just above 10,000, to give us that elite status thing that would put us into a #1 sales category on Amazon in a particular genre subcategory. That's exactly what we would expect. So our figure of 1 in 100 for our reviews, that was actually a pretty good figure to use for our calculation. So remember, go woke, go broke is a lie. And if anybody out there says that a particular book is doing bad because it's too liberal, or because it's too conservative, or it's too libertarian, or it's too anything, and then they quote you some BookScan numbers, remember, those BookScan numbers are lying, and so is the person making the claim. And that's my video, and thank you very much for watching.